All right, everybody's got to do that little thing. And I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to make it bigger. Bear with me. Oh, come on. Oh, I hate when it does that. Just a second. Oh, there we go. Okay. And then let me go ahead and do the slideshow. Okay.
We've been working all summer on upping our technology game.
There we go. All right, let's get started.
Good. Hey, well, welcome back, everybody. I trust everyone had a good summer and ready to ease into the fall. We sent you out a lot of reading. We're sure everybody read everything we sent, and then we have been at the top of your mind. It's just like, I cannot wait to get back with those guys. But just in case your memory's faded, this is I think it's our fourth one, right? Even though it says session 6. Yes, it's actually our fourth one. We've covered the overview of exit planning, defining owner goals, and then understanding value in a business. And so, Lisa, could you pop to the next slide?
Yes, I can.
But we talked about this. We introduced this concept, the idea of the 3 legs of the stool. And today, we're really going to focus in on one of them, the pretty peach bubble there, personal wealth planning. As we know, owners are people, multifaceted people, and this complex planning process, as each leg gets shaped, other things shape as well. So Lisa and Walt are going to focus in on just the importance of personal wealth planning and then some of the aspects of it. And Lisa, if you could flip to the next slide. Yeah, and it might help think that, like, even those 2 sides of this diagram you see, where there's the owner in the middle, personal goals and financial goals, where, as we all know, a business can have a value of X, and it may not be worth what the owner hopes it to be worth to meet those personal goals. So the interplay of the 2 over time is really critical. And it does all boil back to complex planning as early as possible, so that when you get there, all these goals are as attainable as possible. And with that, Lisa.
All right. Well, and I think to pick up on what you're saying, Corby, there's almost really 4 sides to this, because there's you personally, your personal goals and your financial goals, and then you in the business as a business owner, the business's goals and the business's financial goals. And that makes it even a little more complex. But today, what we're going to do, what Corby already shared, is that we're going to focus more on the personal financial planning or wealth management side for us business owners. And it's often a neglected area, because honestly, we're busy. All our energy is going into the business. And we don't really take the time to get this part of our house in order. And yet it's so critical in order to pull together a successful business exit. So, and I'm sorry, this is a little small, but you'll get the idea. And I'm actually going to read what's on each side. The way we see it is that, the financial life plan has 2 sides to it. It has the traditional financial planning side that we're all used to, which is, and I'm going to talk briefly about each of these areas, or most of them except for education. Cash flow planning, tax planning, insurance planning, retirement planning, education fits in there depending on how old you are, how old your kids are, investment planning, and estate planning. And so there's a lot of different facets. What I find is that many people who haven't spent a lot of time on this think it's all about your portfolio. And for most business owners, that is absolutely not the answer. Yeah, eventually, especially if you're getting some sort of windfall from the sale of your business, investment planning is definitely going to be an important part. But if you don't have all the other pieces in order, the portfolio is not going to totally do it for you. And on the holistic side of things, the questions that we're trying to help our clients answer with our integrated approach is, what's my purpose? And more importantly, what's my purpose going to be on the other side of this transaction? What's my vision for the future? Where can I find meaning and purpose Where do I invest, to go next? And when I say invest, I don't mean necessarily stocks and bonds. I mean, are there some time investments, maybe financial investments that I need to make to build out a hobby, or maybe I want to learn something new and I'm going to start another business, or I want to go back to school, or whatever it is. All of that ties back to what's important to me. What kind of work do I want to do, if I'm going to do work at all? I mean, so that's a big discernment for many business owners. We've talked a little bit about that. You might be required to work. Walter will be talking about different exit plans next session, next Wednesday. And so some of them are going to involve continued work in your current business, but now with a different owner. Or you might decide to go do some consulting elsewhere and not have to worry about running a business. And then, we had sent you out the "Are you ready to retire?" questionnaire. And this is a big question. People don't put enough planning and enough time and energy often into thinking about what goes into retiring. What do I need to think about? What am I going to do? You might be young. You may be what other people would call more mature, and you still feel like you've got more to give. So there's a lot to think about. The key is that we're trying to integrate values, a vision for a future life with your money. And at least at our firm, we're trying to do it to help you build a life without regrets. So just as a reminder, anytime we're going through a significant transition in our lives, like the sale of a business, it's not a sell the business, get the money, and everything's hunky-dory. And yet so many people, even professionals working with business owners, think it's as simple as that. You get to the ending, you get the money, and boom, you ride off into the sunset and everything's perfect. What we know, as certainly as a certified financial transitionist, is that we know that there's often 4 stages to a transition. And for business owners, as I've talked about before, there may even be 5, sort of a double ending, where the first ending is deciding that you want to sell the business, and it would go in front of really anticipation. And then there's the whole anticipation of preparing for the transaction before we actually get to the point of signing the documents, handing over the keys, so to speak, getting the big deposit in your bank account. And then it's not over. As you can see, passage is a huge stage. It can last years for some people, can be a series of months, depending on what you're moving towards. It includes sometimes a little bit of fear, like what the heck am I going to do next? And your significant other or spouse may be thinking the same thing. It may be chaotic. Corby was just talking about getting back into the fall routine, and it can be disorienting when you sell your business where you've put all your time and energy, or maybe most of your time and energy for many years, and now you have no rhythm to your life. And that's why we find sometimes business owners coming on back into the office, even if honestly the business is moving on, because they're looking for some routine, something that's familiar. And so this is a really important piece to think about. What new routines might you build as you get to that post exit? And then finally, obviously, hopefully, there's a lot of possibilities because of some newfound financial wealth, because of some newfound time freedom. All of that gives you possibilities and opportunities. And then we get to new normal. And it's one of those things where it sort of sneaks up on you and you realize all of a sudden, I'm really okay with where I am, and it's different. It's not how it used to be. It's not the same as normal before. And by the way, we're using the same model currently with the pandemic. And I know we'd all like to believe that we're already at new normal. I would tell you that we in the Financial Transitionist Institute believe at best we're in passage right now, especially given what we're seeing this fall. We are not at our new normal yet. That's coming later. And so you can apply these 4 stages of transition across different kinds of transition, whether it's a pandemic or selling your business. But the key piece is It's not ending to new normal, and preparing to navigate that passage is important. The last thing I'll say is that often when you're in passage, you can feel lost. There's a loss of identity that often business owners feel. You can feel like you're all over the place, you're scattered, maybe you're really focused, like there's one thing I need to do, and yet there are actually a number of things you need to be doing. You can just be in a fog. You can also feel really good about it. With really good planning, to Corby's point, it can feel invigorating and exciting. And it can be positive, but I want to also normalize that for a lot of business owners, it's often disoriented. And when you're going through a significant transition, your IQ can actually be reduced temporarily, which is a little scary because this is also when you're signing all the documents and making all the decisions. So it's great to have a team of people working with you to help get you through that transition.
Yeah, Lisa, if I could interject, there's a
Yes,
Exit Planning Institute did a survey a few years ago that 75% of business owners profoundly regret selling within 2 years. That's 75%. And the primary reason is they haven't done that kind of planning, and they're not walking in with eyes wide open. So one of those many facets that Lisa mentioned, it just totally took them by surprise, and it has an impact. So
yep. And well, they thought it was all about the money often.
exactly.
It was about the money, getting to the end, not having to be responsible for running the business, all the legal considerations, and yet it was so much more than that.
More.
So let's dive into some of the areas that I think it's important for you to be thinking about prior to selling your business. When we talk about doing the financial planning work, it needs to happen in advance, because what we're trying to determine is what is your personal number that you need to get from the business, what things need to be lined up, or can you leverage the business before you sell it to have the most successful exit possible. Cash flow is one of the most important drivers that will make or break the success of your exit planning strategy. One of the things that we noticed often is that business owners have commingled their personal expenses with the business. They've got a car lease, they've got travel and entertainment that they've been running through the business. They've got their cell phone expenses running through the business. They've got all kinds of things intermingled. And so it gets really tricky for a couple of reasons. First of all, when you go to actually get to the point of selling your business and somebody starts going through your business expenses with a fine-tuned comb, they're going to want all of those expenses off of there because they're not paying for that. And then if you're trying to run your number, you may be underestimating what your real expenses are if you don't make this really clear separation. This is something I've been working on for a while. You know, in the meantime, you could have the business reimburse you perhaps, but making it really clean on your P&L is important. And as I just said, that getting to your actual expenses as they will be post-exit, I hesitate to call it retirement, but retirement are going to drive the nut that you need on a monthly basis, which then drives the overall number that you're trying to get, keeping in mind, will you have Social Security or a pension coming in, all of that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And this is the other thing, and Walter will end up talking about this more, especially next session, is how has your cash flowed in the past? Like, I pay myself a monthly draw, so I don't get a paycheck like everybody else does. Probably one of the things I will have to change at some point. So how have you been getting your money, and then how is it going to flow to you going forward? Are you going to get quarterly note payments? Are you just going to get a lump sum? I know we all dream of getting some giant lump sum that we can manage for ourselves, but often that's not how it goes. So understanding how the cash has been flowing for you, what the rhythm of your cash flow is now, how that might change, preparing for that change will be really important. And as I said, your exit path is going to determine the cash flow, and we'll be spending much more time diving into that next time. But Walter, this is a good time for you to jump in, because we need to talk about tax planning considerations.
Great, thanks, Lisa. So tax planning considerations are very important. For one thing, we've talked about this in previous sessions, and we'll be talking about it again next session. But when you're doing your financial planning, you're looking at what you're going to net from the sale of your business. So taxes are a major component of that net price. So, if your business is going to sell for $10 million, you're not going to walk away with $10 million. You're going to walk away with $10 million minus taxes, minus expenses of sale and things like that. So taxes play a very big role as you move forward with your financial planning. And like everything with tax planning, the sooner you do it, the better. Some people hesitate because tax laws are always changing, but there are certain underlying tax laws that don't really change much. I mean, the rates may change around them, but the basic strategies remain the same and remain valid. So for instance, just the basic, are you going to set your sale up as an asset sale or a stock sale? There's dramatically different tax ramifications of the structure of that sale. If you're a C corporation, maybe it makes sense to convert to an S corporation to avoid double tax. But if you want to do that, you have to give yourself a 5-year window for that to work. So there's lots of things that need to be looked at in advance. Even as you get closer to the sale, maybe it makes sense if you have some charitable intent to take a portion of your stock and put it in some type of charitable trust to avoid the tax on that piece. Or maybe put it into some other type of trust just for estate planning purposes. Or maybe even give some of the shares to someone in a lower tax bracket, that type of thing. So there are steps you can take in advance that should help you mitigate your tax situation. And, for most attorneys are comfortable taking these steps right up until the letter of intent is signed. Some are even more aggressive than that, but that's kind of our bright line. If anything you can do right up into letter of intent, we're fine with. But obviously, some of these considerations have to be taken advantage of farther in advance. So, oftentimes, unfortunately, we'll either pick up a new client who just had a sale, or I've had my own clients, where it's a smaller situation and they call up and they say, "Hey, I just sold my business." So that's a little scary. But even in that situation, there are things you can do post sale. Right now, there's opportunity zone possibilities where you can invest your proceeds into an opportunity zone. If you do that, you get to defer the tax until 2026, and potentially you'll even get a 10% reduction in your gain. There's some pros and cons to that, especially with the possibility that capital gain rates are going to go up. So you may be deferring your tax into a higher tax rate. So need to have some special considerations there. Or maybe a client, has a big gain and they decide they want to put a lot of it into a donor advised fund to take advantage of the charitable contribution in the year of their big income. So there are things that can be done post sale.
Hey, Walter, really quick. I had a question. I've got a client who is on a multi-year, earn out and buyout over the contract. And if you think just, it's looking like they're going to change capital gains, how do you, is that going to be looked at? Can they say the transaction occurred before the change, or is it because the realization is something they asked me and I figured I'd get around to it eventually. If it changes, are they going to look at it on a year by year basis, or are they going to look at it and say the transaction occurred back in 2020, and they're just getting paid out in yearly earnouts as they hit projections, and then each year? Or will it be, you got lucky the first 2 years and the next 2 years will be whatever the new increase is?
Yeah, the general rule is you pay tax, the tax rate that's in effect in the year that you receive the money. So if rates go up and you're collecting money into the future, you're going to pay at those higher rates. One planning opportunity that is available is if your sale is structured as an installment sale, which is a sale where you receive some money up front and you get some later.
None of it's guaranteed. That's
okay. You can actually have what's called a contingent installment sale. It's a little complicated, but basically you figure out your maximum price, you pay tax, that's your installment sale. And then at the end, you make an adjustment if you receive less or more. But the advantage of that could be with an installment sale, usually if it's an installment sale, people just go with it. But you can actually elect out of installment sale treatment. So if the capital gain rates are going to go up dramatically, it could make sense if you have a sale in 2021 that could be an installment sale, it may make sense to opt out of that. Hopefully it's not too late to do that. There is some talk
No, they
that
haven't
the capital
filed
gain
anything
rate
yet.
will be retroactive.
The sale actually took place. It was actually, I just realized it wasn't 2020. It was actually 2021. It took place this past May. May 17th was the closing date. So I
Okay.
think it's definitely possible. We spoke with the accountant. We kept a bunch of extra cash just in case, and we were going to plan to make a second distribution should we decide to not pay it all up.
Yeah.
I think we were hoping by now a little bit more guidance on where the capital gains treatments were going to go, but there's a lot of other things going on right now. So
Yeah.
we're kind of dealing that later. So sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
That's a good question. But the good news is, they're going to have until they file their tax return to make the decision as to whether or not they want to do the installment sale. So they should have some
guidance,
clarity by then. That I have a lot of clients who are lobbyists, and I was kind of surprised, but they're pretty certain there's going to be tax legislation in the fall at some point. And they would not be surprised if that capital gain rate kicks in either on the date of the proposed legislation or the date of enactment, as opposed to pushing it off. So that could be bad news for some people, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yep.
And let me interject a commentary here as exit planners. This discussion really highlights, Pat and I connect with Walter all the time, because almost every little twist of an exit planning engagement can have tax implications. And the strategies to avoid those things, one, they take time, but two, they take the real knowledgeable expertise. And the same goes with what Lisa does in financial planning. Is if somebody can't speak to the breadth, there's a possibility a client will miss out on opportunities. So finding those advisors that do speak to the breadth is really important. Huge implications.
Yeah. And then the final thing I would say, and this is really more, it's kind of a combination of what I do and what Lisa does, but as you head into your post-sale life, there could be opportunities. I guess the planning there really is, you just kind of want to manage your tax bracket. So if you've got a pot of money, some of it's retirement money, some of it isn't, you really want to map out how you're going to draw down on those funds to minimize your taxes. And there are lots of opportunities to do that. We have clients who oftentimes will retire, and maybe there's not even a sale of business involved, but they'll retire, but they retire before they're required to start drawing down on their taxable retirement account. So there could be a period of time there where you have an opportunity to do some Roth conversions, which is going to take advantage of a low tax rate and also reduce your RMD requirements later on. So there's lots of opportunities there, but it really comes down to detailed cash flow and tax planning at that point. That's all I have, Lisa, on that side.
All right. Yeah. And we feel like there's often a window for clients where they've gone from being, as a business owner, maybe you're making, 400, 500, $1 million, whatever it is. And now, boom, you've got this pot of cash, but you don't have taxable income, and you might have some investment income. To Walter's point, we're often going to encourage you to hold off on Social Security to age 70 if you can, and then you don't have to take required minimum distributions until at age 72. So there's often this window where your tax bracket is low. And if we're thinking about the family tax planning situation, it might make sense to do some Roth IRA conversions along the way, at least until we get to 70 or 72. And then we're sort of done with that, because to Walter's point, now we're getting into higher tax brackets and that kind of thing. So Really important to have that coordination of team members as well, to do this right. So, hold on one second, there we go. So, this is often the piece that everybody thinks I'm focused on as business owners when they're thinking about their personal financial planning situation. All they're focused on is the investment management considerations. And yet, as you can start to see, there are multiple facets to really having a good wealth management strategy as you exit your business. So one of the things for a lot of business owners, especially small business owners, we find that their business is their retirement plan. And so this exit in this windfall is what is going to make or break their retirement strategy. And to what, Corby and Walter have been talking about, it becomes really important to understand how are you going to structure the portfolio to maybe provide you with, and I put it in air quotes, an income. So some sort of monthly payment so that you can meet your expenses. You also don't want to have everything in growth-oriented or risky investment strategies, because the worst thing that can happen is what we call bad timing, where you go to retire, you've got this pot of money, it's all invested, maybe pretty growth-oriented. We have a couple of back-to-back down years in the market, and now you have permanently impacted, from a negative standpoint, your retirement strategy, but you won't know how bad it is until about 20 years out, because you'll have money still. You'll just run out of money sooner. And so being able to weather different markets, to be prepared for unexpected cash needs is really important as you put together an investment strategy. Also, are there other goals to fund? Maybe you're still paying for college education. Maybe you are supporting an older family member. We've got to understand all of the different goals. What are their timelines? How important are they? Are they flexible? And often what we do is a goals-based approach where we have different pockets of money for different goals that are structured with different asset allocations and different risk, depending on how soon we need the money. Obviously, the money I need soonest, I'm not taking the same risk with that, the money that is long-term and I'm not going to have to touch for 10 or 15 years. And so really having this thoughtful strategy is important. And also, I say here, what will your risk tolerance be? You may be at a point where you're retiring, where up until now, you've been a normal risk taker business owner, but now you're like, whoa, I'm not planning on starting another business. I'm not going to be doing any consulting. I can't afford to take the same risk I did before. And one of the more important questions that I think people don't ask enough, but you need software to really figure it out, is how much risk do I need to take? Sometimes we tell our clients, you don't need to take as much risk. You don't need to be trying to track the S&P 500. This is the return you need to get. And I know that may sound foreign to some people, because they think I just need to try to grow my money as much as possible. If you're taking that approach, you are taking perhaps more risk than you need to, and then you are possibly subject to what I talked about as bad timing risk. So knowing what return you need to get may drive, and what your risk tolerance will be post-transaction is a critical part of structuring the portfolio. So what are all of the things that we need to think about when we're running planning numbers? And just as Walter has talked about with the tax planning, we want to have run planning numbers before anything is signed off on, before there is a transaction, because we need to know how much money do we need to get net of taxes and transaction costs, not the gross number. And I often talk to business owners where, well, I'm going to get 10 million, or I'm going to get 5 million, or I'm going to get 2 million, and that's going to be fine, except they haven't taken into account taxes and transaction costs. And also they're not going to get the whole lump sum up front. And so really running those numbers to know what your number is critical. So what goes into figuring out your number? There's a whole bunch of things. So one that's on a lot of people's minds right now is inflation. Inflation has been quite low over the last 20 years, but we're seeing it creep up. Now, the big question is, are we permanently moving to 5% or higher inflation? Is it going to fall back closer to 3% or maybe even 2.5%? And we play with those numbers in the software to see how does that change your number. Just so you know, we've been using 3% for the last few years and projecting that all the way out for the rest of our clients' lifetimes. I've talked about cash flow, living expenses. What are your post-transaction living expenses? Who are you supporting? Anybody? What expenses are you going to have to pick up that the business has picked up? And so there's a number of different things to consider there. Social Security, when are you going to claim Social Security? And I know there is a new report that just came out from the trustees of Social Security saying that, it's looking like Social Security may run out of its trust fund money earlier than we expected. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard this. And I'm fairly confident that there will be some changes, but they may be sort of last minute, like they were honestly 30 years ago. But figuring out your claiming strategy is important. Do you have a spouse? How is your health? If your health isn't good, you might claim Social Security early. If your health is good and you think that you can get to what is often the break-even point for Social Security of your early 80s, but by waiting until 70 and you get more money, you might wait. Or if cash flow is tight, then you might take Social Security at full retirement age rather than waiting. But if you can wait from your full retirement age until age 70, each year you get an 8% benefit increase. That's really important because I cannot guarantee you that I can make each year 8% on your portfolio. Some years I'm going to exceed that. Some years I'm going to make less. It might even be negative. And so that's something that you really need to sit with a professional, crunch numbers, look at your family situation, your health situation, your cash flow situation to decide what's going to make sense for you. And then what is your healthcare situation? So let's say you are selling the business prior to 65 when you qualify for Medicare. What are you going to do about health insurance? Maybe the business has been paying that. Currently, my husband and I, he's a retired Fairfax County employee. He's on Medicare, but we still have a couple of kids on our health plan for a while. We're paying $2,200 a month, and that's not bad. It can be worse than that. And so have you factored that into your cash flow? Is there anything you can work out through the business where you might be able to do something, at least for the first couple of years, depending on how you've structured the deal, where you're still on the company's health care? Do you have an association that you're part of where you can get a reduced cost? So there's a lot to think about, and you don't want to be doing this at the last minute. You want to have figured this out well in advance because it's got to go into your living expense numbers, and there may be some steps you need to take with the business in advance to line this up. Lifespan is really important. We like to say, how long are you going to be on the planet? That's how we say it nicely at Omega. So, what's your family's longevity? Do you have any health issues that might change your lifespan? The shorter you're going to be on the planet, the less money you need or the more you can spend while you're here. But maybe your spouse has a lot of longevity, and so we need to plan for that. So it's really important to figure that piece out too. And then finally, as I talked about on the other slide, what rate of return are we assuming given your risk tolerance, your cash flow needs? It's going to be different for everybody. It is not a one size fits all answer. And I see we've got a couple questions. So, all right. Oh, I get it. You got to go. That's fine. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. I totally understand. So let's keep going. Insurance considerations. So take care.
All right.
So there are a number, again, we think in terms of health insurance, but there may be some other things that as a business owner, you could set up in advance of a sale. I had one business owner client who we got long-term care, a group long-term care insurance program set up while he was still the owner prior to executing an ESOP transaction. And then what happened is that he and his wife were able to be part of the group program, which was at a reduced cost versus if they had gone out and got their own long-term care insurance. Now they had to pay those premiums post-sale or post, ESOP, but it was cheaper than they would have been able to obtain on their own. And that's one of those unique benefits of being a business owner that you need to take advantage of while you're still a business owner. And then there's life insurance. So, if this is going to be a graduated transition, it's incredibly important to have life insurance backing the transaction. And certainly if there's going to be, maybe it's an internal sale, getting those buy-sell policies set up. Now, sometimes people are uninsurable, and that's a challenge. And so now the business is going to have to figure out how to cover and pay off any obligations to that other owner's family. So you want to be thinking about these things early. Like I've already I'm not intending to sell my business anytime soon, but I've already got life insurance, key person life insurance in place that eventually, as I have some future owners, they will start to pick up paying the premiums. But I've got it in place while my health is good and the costs are lower. It's hard to put these kind of things in place later on. And then what we find is, okay, so you had buy-sell insurance for that transition, that transaction, but maybe you need to have some life insurance post-sale. And again, the sooner you can get that in place, the better, because we know what your health situation is. You're younger. You don't want to be doing all of these things later on post-sale when maybe it's going to be harder to get. And it might be like we find for some of our clients, we just need to get them to Social Security, maximum Social Security payout. And then we can drop the insurance. We don't need to keep it permanently, but maybe there are some permanent needs, especially if we have some changes in the estate tax laws. And you have a big transaction. Let's say you're going to get $10 million and and let's say that's the net from your business being sold. We're looking at a situation where the estate tax exemption might drop to 5 million or less. Well, now you have a situation where you may want to have some life insurance to help pay for taxes at your death. So lots of things to think about there. And then disability. Now, often disability goes away when you're 65, if you have it through the business. Maybe you've only got that group disability insurance, and maybe you're going to keep doing some work. You're going to maybe do some consulting, and it might be that depending on how good, or maybe the transaction was a little leaner, you might want to have some disability insurance. And it might be that you originally get it through the business, but then you can transition that. It's portable for you to use for personal needs. So again, always great to be thinking about these things in advance, not right before the transaction. And finally, this is something I'm finding with our wealthier clients is really a big problem, is that they are often underinsured for liability protection. And so now prior to the sale of the business, you had maybe you had $500,000 in a 401k plan, maybe you had some investments outside of that, but really your net worth was all tied up in the business. Now you've had a big transaction and perhaps you got $5 million for that transaction. Now your net worth has gone up exponentially. And you are much more exposed that if you got in a car accident, or one of your family members did, or maybe there was an accident at your home, somebody sues you, and now you are the deep pockets thanks to your business sale. And so having increased umbrella liability coverage is really critical. And it's so easy to do, and it's really inexpensive for the protection, that buffer that it offers you. Okay, so a final one is estate planning. And again, this is just like Walter's tax planning. And he alluded to some techniques that you can utilize. Transferring business value into a trust. You got to do this before the transaction. You can't wait until the transaction. Updating your documents post-sale is really important. So, maybe your prior documents, your trust, your revocable trust, your will, they all referenced your business. Now you're not the business owner. So you want to get that cleaned up. Now your net worth has changed. Now there's some new considerations as far as who's going to get what money, how they get that money. Entitling and beneficiaries. We often see that things aren't readjusted for the new reality of new wealth, but also now you're not a business owner. Maybe you need new protections. So there's absolutely planning to be done prior to sale to get some opportunities maybe for saving money on either income taxes or estate taxes. especially with some potential changes out there. And then post-sale, getting your estate planning documents in order, making sure titling and beneficiaries line up correctly. So there's a lot to think about. It can seem like all you need to worry about is how am I going to invest the money? And yet, honestly, there are so many other pieces that need to be addressed. So with that, I'm going to, let me just sum up the actions to be that we think you should be considering, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Corbin. So, really there's several things. If you're actively considering an exit right now over the next year or two, you need to get a handle on your expenses and tax planning now. Walters, I think, made that case really clear, and depending on the kind of exit you're doing, there's a lot to consider. Running some planning numbers, knowing what your number is, because if you don't know your number, you're negotiating for a sale. Any number could be the right number, but it might not be the right one. And then having somebody review all of your benefits and insurance pre-sale, and then looking ahead to post-sale, what's going to go away, what do you need to pick up on your own, what's going to change. And then finally, getting your estate planning in order, both pre-sale to take advantage of some planning opportunities and post-sale to make sure everything is in order. Obviously, I didn't mention the investment side of things. It goes without saying, you need to have a smart strategy there. You need to think about what buckets you're going to pull money from, but these are the areas that I think get overlooked and are especially important. And I said Corby's going to do it, but I think, Walter, were you going to wrap us up here?
Yes. So just a preview of our final two sessions. September 15th, I'll be covering exit paths. There's, depending on how you categorize it, probably at least 5 different ways to exit your business. So we're going to cover all those. We'll discuss the pros and cons from maintaining the business culture to getting paid more and getting paid quicker. We'll go through the pros and cons of each path. And then October 6th, Corby's going to talk about the sellable business. And, he's basically going to be emphasizing is that there's a difference between a sellable business and a valuable business. So that's going to be a great session. Corby does a great job with that when that's certainly his area of expertise. So we're looking forward to those final 2 sessions, and we think they'll be very, very, very helpful. Hey, Lisa.
So with that, yes.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So, in my practice, married couples, generally speaking, one spouse is the point person for income taxes. Usually, I'm not sure if they both hate it and one of them is forced to do it or one of them actually enjoys it. But usually I'm dealing with one spouse or the other almost exclusively. But what you've been discussing today, that's not going to work. So how do you approach that as far as incorporating both spouses in the planning?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Walter, because we find that as well. Somebody, and it's could be male or female, who's been in charge of the finances, the taxes, the portfolio. Sometimes it's 2 different people. And this is such an important transition in both people's lives. It isn't just the business owner, because there are personal considerations. How are we going to live? Where are we going to live? What are you going to be doing? And there's that old adage, what is it? I don't even like it because I think it's so old fashioned. But I love you for better or worse, but not lunch and dinner, or whatever it is. Or so it is a transition for everybody, both financially and personally. And so what we really insist on from the get-go is, even if one person's reached out to us initially, maybe to vet us, we really insist on having both parts of the couple at all of those planning meetings. Now, it may be that once we get a plan in place, we know where we're going, we know what we're going to be spending, we know how we're going to structure things, we've agreed on all of that, that one person in the couple or the other is going to be the point person. But when we're going through all of the planning, Walter, it is so important to have both people there to be knowledgeable about what is going to happen next. And there's some important decisions to be made about what are we planning for, how much money is going to be coming in, what's that going to buy us. So we're pretty insistent on, we've got to do this together. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because often business owners are used to calling the shots and handling everything, and they haven't kept their spouse in the loop. And this is not a time to keep running down that path by yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. That's a great answer.
Anyone else have a question? Barbara, Kelly, or Lisa?
I wanted to ask, you lost me a little bit when you were talking about life insurance and life insurance policies as and turning them over to successors. Can you kind of repeat that point?
Yeah, so and so often this happens like in a situation where you're planning an internal sale over the next 5 to 10 years. And so what you want to make sure you do is have some funding that if something happened to me, the business or my other partners have money to pay my family so that my spouse doesn't have to become the successor owner in the business.
Right.
And the cheapest way to do that is life insurance. And basically the co-owners cross-own life insurance on each other, pay the premiums on those policies for each other, so that if something happens to one of the owners, there is this chunk of life insurance that's paid out, which then is paid out to the family to keep spouses from coming into the business. Because if you didn't have any money, you have two choices. You've either got to set up some payment plan, and I've seen that happen with family businesses where they're obligated for the next 10 years to pay out to other family members or to the spouse of the family member. And it's a drain on the business. And it can really derail a business's success because of having to make those payments. Or the other worst case is that spouse comes in or the child comes into the business. And now you've got a partner you don't want.
Yeah, well, and I'm a lawyer, and my spouse is not, so that can't happen. And the successors, it is going to be an internal sale, and the successors are much younger than I am. So I guess what you're suggesting is that there should be a life insurance policy on me that they pay.
Yep, and then on them that you pay.
Why do I need a life insurance policy on them?
For the same reason that all of a sudden they die unexpectedly and you have to pay out their ownership share to a family member.
Okay, I see. When they have an ownership share, which they don't.
Right,
now.
exactly. Yeah, so that's part of when you go to formalize a succession plan and you're bringing other owners in, that's when all this planning needs to start happening.
Yeah, and then and along that same lines, then there are the implications where you need a good accountant / tax advisor. Because you think about that, if they're going to pay for a premium of a policy on you, to a degree, they could go, well, why would we do that? It's money out of our pocket, right? So there are ways to strategize to, in a way, let the business pay for it. And it may be an increase in salary, it may be something else, so it's not punitive. Because, those insurance policies, they're not cheap.
Right, especially if you're older. So that would be like a business expense then?
Yeah, and that's where Walter, can you answer that question? Like in a buy-sell agreement?
Yeah, life insurance premiums are not deductible, generally speaking, because the idea is that the life insurance proceeds are not taxable.
Yeah.
Now you can structure things for employee life and things like that where there is a tax deduction associated with that, but it's a tricky area, Barbara, but we can certainly go through it.
Okay, yeah. And Corby, I have Walter as my tax advisor. So I'm all set.
Great hand. Yeah, he's the guy we call here. Walter, what do we do here?
Okay, thanks.
Excellent question, Barbara. Anyone else? Lisa, Kelly, or Corby, Walter, any other questions that you have?
I'm all set. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
No, great session. Thanks.
Well, thanks for being here. We've got 2 more sessions. I will send out, we'll send out the recording, and we'll send out the slides. If you have any questions, our contact information is here. It'll be on the slides as well. We welcome, the opportunity to talk with you about your personal particular situation with your business and what you're thinking about doing. So with that, thank you for your time. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week, this on Wednesday, same time, for Exit Paths.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Take care. Have a great
Thanks
one.
all.